Hello and welcome to Podcast.init, the podcast about Python and the people who make it great. When you're ready to launch your next app or want to try a project you hear about on the show, you'll need somewhere to deploy it, so take a look at our friends over at Linode. With the launch of their managed Kubernetes platform, it's easy to get started with the next generation of deployment and scaling, powered by the battle-tested Linode platform, including simple pricing, node balancers, 40 gigabit networking, dedicated CPU and GPU instances, and worldwide data centers. Go to pythonpodcast.com/linode, that's Linode, today and get a $100 credit to try out a Kubernetes cluster of your own. And don't forget to thank them for their continued support of this show. Your host, as usual, is Tobias Macey, and today I'm interviewing Didier Rodrigues Lopes about the OpenBB Terminal, a modern Python-based integrated environment for investment research. So, Didier, can you start by introducing yourself?
Yes, hi Tobias, thank you for having me. My name is Didier Rodrigues Lopes, and I started GameStone Terminal one year and a half ago, and now it's called OpenBB Terminal. I'm originally from Portugal. I was born in Switzerland, but I'm Portuguese. I'm currently living in London and working on the OpenBB Terminal full-time.
And do you remember how you first got introduced to Python?
I'm a bachelor in electrical and computer engineering from Portugal, and then I went to do a master in control systems at Imperial, and at the time we used a lot of MATLAB. When I left Imperial to join the software engineering world on my spare time, I wanted to get into data science and machine learning, and Python was the best tool to play with the data and machine learning. So that's what I started learning on my spare time. And coming from a MATLAB background, it was very, very easy and intuitive to learn Python. And after I fell in love with the language and how fast I was able to achieve things with it.
In terms of the OpenBB terminal, can you give a bit of an overview about what it is and some of the story behind how it came to be and what your overall goals are with it?
Yeah, so OpenBB is an investment research platform for everyone, anywhere. And it all started because I wasn't happy with any of the investment research platforms out there. They were either too expensive or too limiting in terms of features and data. And being myself like a software engineer and enjoying to code, I really liked something that I could customize in my own way. And there was nothing like that out there. I was learning about investment at the time, right? I was spending a lot of time on Reddit, looking into these due diligence posts. And I felt like the person writing this post about, like, let's say a Tesla or Apple, they would have like a lot of time put into that, and that post would be like meaningless the week after because the things change. And if we're looking at a different stock, the same happens, the post is no longer relevant. And coming from an engineering background, I was like, there's no way this cannot be automated. And, that's a bit where I wanted to go because I had a full-time job. So I just wanted to save the most time I had on my spare time to just focus on what I was investing and not having like 13 browsers open to check for something, right? So basically I started working on the terminal on the COVID break because I couldn't visit my family because of COVID. I just started leveraging like free API tires, and I started building the terminal, which was basically like a gateway to have access to all this data. And when we talk about like 50 plus data sources, the amount of free data that you can get is actually quite insane because they don't correlate with each other. So provider X may give you news, provider Y may give you historical data, provider Z may give you like options. And this is just for stocks, right? But then there's ETFs, the same goes for Forex, for bonds. That's how it started. And at the beginning, I started with it closed source because my idea was to set up a strong architecture so that then people could come and build on top. And after 2 months of working it on my spare time, like 4 to 6 hours a day on top of a full-time job, I put it live. And I've been doing like open source projects for a while, but this was the first one that I actually put on Reddit because I just thought, you know what, I learned so much from Reddit. I think that, people may find it interesting. And in like 24 hours, he got over 4,000 stars, which was like crazy, like a top in Hacker News. We got like a post on Vice magazine the week after, I believe. Yeah, the rest is history. And fun fact is actually that the name of the terminal was something different at the time, but because I was involved on the whole GME thing, and I love Elon Musk, and he put like GameStonk on the tweet. I just thought, GameStonk terminal actually sounds pretty neat.
As far as the use cases that somebody might have for it, you mentioned that there were these due diligence posts that kind of inspired you to go down this path. But what are some of the different applications that people have for doing this type of financial research and some of the limitations in the different systems that exist? You mentioned that some are too expensive, some are limited, but what were some of those limitations that you're looking to overcome and the specific audience that you're trying to reach through this project?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things out there. So there are very, very good platforms out there, but I feel like First of all, none of them is really customizable. So they can give you some layers of freedom, but you end up seeing that a lot of people that are known in the retail world, for instance, have really customizable tools like Excel spreadsheets and things like that. And then if we go into institutions, what happens is that they have like these investment research reports that they create, but the data belongs to the hedge fund or the bank or whatever entity they are attached with. And we're trying to do is kind of being like this one-stop shop for investment research, where people can just rely on a platform and the data they can reach within it and create their own like research reports, right? There are other tools out there. There's, for instance, TradingView, like Refinitiv Icon, and a couple of more, but they are very good at what they do and very focused. So there's this like a trade-off where they are very, very expensive and they provide like a big coverage, or they are like much cheaper, but they are very focused on one topic. And what we're trying to do is, everything in one place. So not just focus on stocks or crypto, but actually have both, because like, the Bitcoin soaring, for instance, may have an impact on the price of Apple, or for instance, something that we allow our users to see is that if you look into the Google search interest for the word quarantine, you'll see that interest goes up, the stock price of an airline goes down, and that's type of like a correlation and analysis that our platform allows you to do.
And the obvious elephant in the room, and what I'm assuming the name is inspired by, is the Bloomberg Terminal, which I've heard a lot about in various contexts. And I'm wondering what you see as the differentiating features that the OpenBB Terminal has, and some of the cases where the Bloomberg Terminal might still have the advantage, or some of the ways that you're looking to not necessarily compete with, but at least provide an alternative to that for people who don't necessarily have the capital available to be able to invest in what I understand is a quite substantial subscription cost.
I think from a marketing standpoint, I gotta say that I love people comparing us to Bloomberg Terminal, because I think that, that helps us a lot. But honestly, I don't see us as a Bloomberg competitor. I think we are after a different type of market. And even like our name is actually not related with the Bloomberg. So the BB actually stands for, because me and James, one of the other founders, we were investing in BlackBerry at the time, and we were losing quite some money on it. And to kind of keep the tradition of, losing money on GME, so calling the terminal game stonk, and then losing money on BlackBerry, and, calling it like OpenBB, and because of the ticker. So that's, where the name comes from. Yeah, going back to your question. So I think that one thing that Bloomberg is very, very good is that they really have like a very strong ecosystem, and people that are currently using Bloomberg, they won't shift for any platform like anytime soon. And, that is completely fine. But I can tell you, for instance, that none of my friends can afford the Bloomberg terminal, right? And then another thing that you can't do is, and I've talked with people on the industry, is that they can't really build proprietary features on top of the platform, right? So for instance, our lead investor, JJ, he always says like, okay, OpenBB Terminal is not the open source of Bloomberg Terminal. Bloomberg Terminal is actually a proprietary version of an OpenBB Terminal. You know what I mean? So the idea is that people should be able to fork like our project and build their own terminals from it. And that's something that no other like tools out there can do, because we are open source and also Python based, right? The choice of the terminal being Python is not just, random. It's actually because it's really, really easy to build on Python. And we're talking about all these kind of finance degrees, economics degrees, maths, data science. Everyone is learning Python these days in university, and we want to leverage that. We want the people, the community, to help us build this tool, because that's the only way we can actually achieve like, a full like asset coverage and all the markets.
And so in terms of the actual project, can you talk through some of the implementation and the architecture and user experience design that goes into it?
So the terminal is 100% in Python end to end, as I said. So the idea was that we really wanted to be able to ship features faster. And we are currently using like a standard model view controller design. So basically we have the model to handle the data API side. We have the views to display the data on the terminal or other, as I'm going to speak in a second. And then we have the controller, which basically ends the user parameters arguments when they call the commands. And the idea about this convention is that the model can be reused for our other front-end apps. So one day someone may want to fork our terminal and build their own like dashboard or application from it, and they can just rely on the model and create their own controller and view for that specific use case. In terms of like the design, so I think that one thing that changed like a lot. Was at the beginning, there was like no color, there was no style, there was like just the idea was to be able to ship features faster. But as we started growing a community, we understood that, we need to really have like a strong branding, because that's very important when it comes to having a good community around you. So we put a lot of focus on the coloring, the logo, everything from the design perspective. And now if you see our charts out there, you will probably know that they come from the OpenBB terminal, because they are very distinguished than others. The architecture is, in terms of how you access commands, is actually very straightforward. So we have this kind of high level like context, where you have, like, for instance, ETFs, crypto, stocks, you have alternative data, economy, and I foresee one day having like real estate and things like that. Then you go in and you have these multiple menus. So for instance, on stocks, we have like due diligence, technical analysis, like screeners, a bunch of other options. And then when you go inside that, that's when you start having commands that do particular things. So that can be like dark pool data, that can be like insider trading, that can be like price targets from company, that can be news. That's one thing that we wanted to make sure, is that it's really easy to understand how you go from, the big layer to a command in specific. And because we come from this engineering background, we wanted to allow someone to automate this process. So not only you starting to play with the terminal and having to do this every time, but you being able to remember the path to that command and copy it to a file. And then one day you wake up in the morning and you go grab a coffee, you run this file, and it just does the same commands that you would do otherwise, but a couple of seconds without you having to type everything.
And as far as the interfaces that it provides, looking at it, it seems that it's primarily terminal-based, like from an actual terminal initially, but that it also has Python APIs available so that you can just write wrappers around it, and that it also has some integration with the Jupyter ecosystem. And I'm wondering if you could just talk to some of the different ways that people might want to interact with it across those different interfaces.
Yeah, as you said, like mostly is the terminal. Then we have a backend API, and we use that actually for these terminal reports that we are very bullish about, where we allow someone to create like their own reports, not only in terms of the image that they display on these notebook templates where we run them through Papermill, but also from the fact that they can actually produce a more set of rules, where, for instance, instead of just having a customizable like report that shows charts and tables and raw data, they can actually say, if there is not been like any sell in terms of insider trading for the past 1 month, and if the stock price has been going up, and if, I don't know, the GitHub stars of the project has been going up, something like that, you can say that at the top, you can say, okay, it means that my confidence is at least like 60%, and I probably should have a more in-depth look into this report, So we really want to automate the way to do investment research reports. So that's why we put a lot of emphasis on the API. And on the backend side, one of the things we realized when the terminal went viral last year, a lot of people started mentioning that the best thing about Bloomberg Terminal was the chat, right? Was the chat, because you can speak with people about Apple, Tesla, or whatever. I started realizing that, that's actually true. At the time, I still am learning about investment research, and I was talking to my friends about what I was investing, if it was a good idea or not. But then I started like thinking further about this, and I was like, okay, imagine that I actually had access to a platform like that. What would happen is that me and my friends, we would be on a chatting platform such as Discord or Slack or Telegram, and we would have to move to that platform in order to chat about our investment. I was thinking like, the data flow is wrong. Like, if the data should come to us if we are already interacting on a chatting platform, like the user shouldn't have to opt onto another platform. So this is something that we are working like behind the scenes on, this kind of chatting bot, and the team was already able to create this abstraction layer that will work on a Discord, Slack, GroupMe, and Telegram so far. And basically we just bring the data from the terminal into the chatting platform where you already have conversations with your peers. This is why the backend data is super important for us.
In terms of the actual workflow of somebody who's maybe iteratively exploring some analysis, trying to figure out what are the correlations that I'm interested in, what are the different stocks that might be related to a particular asset category, I'm wondering if you can talk through that type of workflow, and then from saying, okay, these are the pieces of information that I'm interested in, I want to be able to monitor this over the long term, or build some sort of regression model to understand, the potential future trajectory of this asset class, just that overall workflow from, initial idea through exploration to automation and, turning it into a kind of repeatable workflow.
That you put it exactly correct. That's exactly the idea. What typically happens is a user starts using the platform and starts understanding that, we have access to a lot of data, and they can also build their own proprietary features on top of it, right? So they start first playing with the data and understanding what we offer, and what sort of commands we have available, how to interact with them, and they learn about that, right? So then the second step is they start building their own like routines where they put like a queue of commands, and basically what used to be research for one equity, they basically put that on a file so that they can use this for other equities, and then they can iterate this document and improve it over time towards what makes sense. So for instance, let's say you are interested on looking into, I don't know, a simple moving average of the stock price, and you realize that, this actually is not that interesting for me. So one thing that you can do on the platform is like you can remove that from the file, and you no longer have to have that noise, like, let's say, being output, right? And this is kind of the first step. And one of the things that we are working now to make even easier is from these routines, I'll actually be able to create an investment research report. So not just splitting the data of the terminal, but actually putting it into a nice like PDF or HTML, even with like your personal logo brand, and being able to use our platform to distribute this to our audience, right? Because at the end of the day, we are a lot of community. So we already allow a lot of things like, for instance, screeners that are set up by people in the community. We already allow people to create their investment research reports and merge it into the platform so that other users can use, right? So these are things that we want to leverage in the long run. And as you say, this is just like a part of it, but then because we also have a lot of emphasis on machine learning and AI, we already have that capability where you can use not only the historical, like for instance, for Apple, but you can actually use multiple different time series to predict like a stock price or a movement up and down. And these are things that data scientists, for instance, can use in order to put on their personal reports. And as far as I know, there is no other platform that allows for putting as much data as an input of a machine learning AI model, and then, put it into like a report along with like raw data or like price targets from different analysts from institutions.
As you're discussing the sort of different use cases and being able to access some of the historical reports of stock tickers, I know that there are whole businesses where that's their entire purpose, is to be able to provide access to those different data assets so that you can do some, model training to be able to say, based on historical data, I'm going to train on data from, 2000 through 2010, build a regression model on the Apple stock. And now I want to play that against, the period from 2010 to 2020 to see how well my model performs so that I can determine whether or not I actually want to employ this for making, purchase decisions for forward-looking investments. I'm wondering how you see yourself comparing to those types of businesses as well, beyond just the kind of financial research ecosystem that we discussed with the Bloomberg terminal, but also in terms of things like other companies that are operating in that space as well.
So I know a couple of people that are doing something like that, but I don't think they allow a big level of freedom towards what you can do. So for instance, I can give you an example. So when you look into like financial courses that are related with data science and allow people to use like, for instance, Yahoo Finance data, right, to build like some AI machine learning model, most of the times what happens is someone spins a notebook and they just import like Yahoo Finance, but that's what they do, just Yahoo Finance, but there's so much more data out there. So we're talking about, you can put like, for instance, the tweets of Elon Musk, when you are trying to predict the stock price of Tesla, you can put like price targets from other analysts on your model. You can put like a Google search words for like a Model 3 of Tesla, like there's so much data out there that we really want to allow data scientists and developers, people to gather around the platform and build these machine learning models with much more data than what currently is available. And that's one of the reasons also that the platform is Python, right? Is because these people are like, they are used to Python. They live in these Python and notebook environments. And that's what our platform is all about, right? So at the end of the day, one of the reasons we are not focused on the web-based interface is because we want to optimize for these, speed of creating investment research and also creating like these machine learning and AI models and actually playing with the data, right?
And then going back to the due diligence example that you mentioned in some of those Reddit posts, what are some of the ways that somebody might use the OpenBB terminal to be able to actually make that a richer and living evaluation to say, I'm making these determinations based on stock data at this point in time, be able to kind of provide a snapshot of the data as it existed, but then, here is the current state of affairs and maybe some initial forecasting so that it can be something that is more long-lived and so that people can invest roughly equal amount of energy in putting together that due diligence, but it has a longer lifespan where it's actually providing utility and value beyond just that, single snapshot in time.
So what we are using for this is basically notebooks and then leveraging like paper mill for it. So basically we create a template and people are able to rerun it. And when it reruns, it basically just uses a new fresh data, right? So for instance, what we don't have is like live reports that basically, if I refresh the browser, like all the data is updated. No, what happens is like you run one of these reports, and at the time, the data that you get is the data that is reported, that appears on the report, and that you can write, like for instance, a markdown cell with your comments in the end, right? And so one of our ideas in the future is, because I personally love Reddit, but I don't feel like Reddit is the place where investment research should happen. I just don't think that, it's the ideal tool. So one of the things that we want to do is actually build this community page of OpenBB where people can share their reports and people can discuss about it. So we're talking about like the distribution of this investment research. And another very interesting thing, which is like people can be held accountable for what they said, right? So for instance, if I'm saying today that, you should buy Apple because, the price is going to shoot up like 20% or something in the next month, right? In the next month, we're going to be able to keep the track of what these users said and kind of, in a way, gamify the game, and then making sure the person that is actually doing financial advice, is held accountable for what they forecasted using their data, right? Because one of the things is, and I think that, again, this is to say that the OpenBB Terminal can bring a lot of value to this type of people, is that when I was reading these reports, right, when you look into the charts that they use, we're not talking about just charts from one source, right? We're talking about charts from like 3, 4, 5 different sources. And having the different platforms where they get this data, it just shows like how much effort and how much time is spent onto this research, right? But if you can build an automated way to just get this data from the same platform and then just being able to switch a ticker and just rerun the same template, like that's a massive value, not only for retail, but also for institutions where they don't really care about the infrastructure because we provide that and they can just customize the report as they want in terms of organization, what matters, what doesn't matter for them, and just use our platform to run on top of it.
In terms of the data sources, you mentioned that in the initial iteration, you were looking at various APIs that had different free tiers. So you're aggregating across those. And I'm wondering what your evaluation process looks like for determining what data sources to include in the out-of-the-box project for somebody who just does a pip install OpenBB Terminal and they just want to get up and running versus data sources that might need to be explicitly configured with an API token to be able to access it, or helping people understand what are the thresholds as far as what the free tier incorporates and when you have to move into a paid plan. And then as far as productizing it, some of the additional data sources that you might want to offer as a service for people who are using your managed product version of it.
Yeah, so I think that how it started is basically I started building it for myself, right? So I started looking for data sources, understanding what they offer. So for instance, if I had the same type of data, I would look for the data source that would allow me to do more API requests per day, right? API calls per day, right? So that's how it started. When the terminal went live, then it was no longer only about myself, but we started inquiring about the community and trying to understand what type of features they wanted. So what started to happen is that people actually would message me and say, oh, can we integrate this data provider? Because I really want to have a look at this data. Right. So that's like how things have evolved, right? But now, then what happened is that some people, for instance, for the same type of the stock price, right? Some people asked from different data sources to give the same type of data. So we started implementing that where basically you can, through a flag on the platform, select the source of where the data comes from. So we are actually giving you a choice in terms of, what data source you want, right? So this is the current state. And we started growing on there. And one thing that we want to make sure is that there are duplicated commands. So basically commands that, have a different kind of name, but they are like in essence the same. So what we would rather is just have a source flag that basically may display the same concept based on what source the user is selecting, right? And now the next step is like we put a lot of emphasis into making sure that the platform was completely free, right? Because that's how I started and what my pain point was. Now that we are on the stage where we have 50 plus data providers and we are only leveraging the free API tiers, what can happen is that we can start integrating paid API keys, right? Because this allows for a more advanced user or a more serious like equity analyst to leverage like faster data be able to do more API calls, having more reliable data. We want this to happen, but we just didn't want to start there because we want more people to use our platform. And currently, the only price you pay is actually having to register with these data providers and get a free API key from them.
Then for somebody who wants to add an additional data source to be able to incorporate it in their analysis, what's the process for actually being able to plug that into the OpenBB terminal and say, I've got this, stock ticker data, and now I actually want to pull in the CNN news feed to be able to understand, what are the world events that might impact the stock that I'm analyzing?
Yeah, I think so. The first thing is usually to register for the API key, right, with this data source and get familiar with their API documentation. So how are they going to call these? Then the second step is understanding like our terminal structure and where that command fits, right? And then once that's out of the way, it's actually fairly straightforward to add to our platform. We spent a lot of time on having a strong contribution guidelines, and we have linters, we have PyTests, so it makes sure that there's a lot of like processes and tests running at the time of a pull request to make sure that when we are actually reviewing, we are just mostly reviewing the code and what is going to be merged onto our code base. And all these kind of linting, the checks and silly mistakes are all checked like in advance, even formatting, so that we have a standard formatting across the platform.
Beyond just the data sources, what are some of the other extension points and integration hooks for people who want to expand on the functionality of the OpenBB terminal? You mentioned that it's a MVC architecture for people who want to fork it and add in their own customizations, but I'm also interested in understanding what are the different hooks for being able to plug into the package as it exists out of the box.
Yeah, I think another interesting one is our API. So for instance, if you just start a notebook and you import like our API, you're already able to access the raw data, but also display data. And that's actually very, very nice for people such as like data scientists or mathematicians or even economists that want to understand like a broader picture of what the economy is doing and correlate with a stock, or basically creating like financial content, right? But then there's the whole like backend API where it allows, for instance, to generate things like, for instance, one thing that we have right on the terminal is a Voila dashboard. We have some proof of concepts there, but the idea is that we want the users to be able to create these kind of widgets to interact with data for certain features. So basically they just spin up a Voila and they are able to play with like a slider and play with the data. Right. So this is something that they can also do. And then I think finally another nice thing is that we started realizing that Excel is super important in the finance world. Like one thing that we have is an Excel integration in certain areas. So for instance, we have a command that is called like discounted cash flow, and when you run it, it just creates like an Excel spreadsheet with a discounted cash flow. And actually, just this week, someone told me that they had a friend that passed like a course using the data from the terminal, and in particular, they really enjoyed that discounted cash flow command.
In terms of the actual project itself, you mentioned that it started as a hobby project and then you released it as open source, and now you are working on it full time and you have some investment. I'm curious if you can talk to some of the overarching product strategy that you have for turning this into a sustainable business, and how you view the governance aspect of the open source component, and what that dividing line will be between what is open source and what you're actually looking to turn into a business strategy.
Yeah, so that's actually a very, very good question. So one of the reasons we're not going for a dashboard yet is actually because of that, because we really want to leverage the community aspect of it. So we want to build partnerships with academia, with the community, because we want people to develop on top of the platform. That's the only way we can achieve and like asset coverage and all the markets, right? And once we are on that stage, what's going to happen is we will build partnerships with, data providers. And we're not talking about just raw data. This can be processed data. So it can be, for instance, the sentiment of Twitter on Apple from a company X, but it can also be just the tweets on Apple, and then you created the machine learning model. And the idea here is that basically that we want to have this infrastructure like platform that connects data to users, where basically we attract more users, we attract more data, we attract more users, we attract more data, right? And the idea here is that we actually don't charge the users directly for the data, but we create like a share revenue model with these data providers, because we are giving them access to a bigger pool of users. And the users don't need to go to other platforms because they will have more and more data through our platform, right? So that's a bit like where we're going to start. And the ultimate goal is to achieve this kind of place for investment research. as it stands, more people are wanting to stay at home and work from home. They want to work on their own terms. They want to be able to, work independently. And this is something that we will be able to provide because people will be able to create like investment research reports from our platform, right? And then there's the other side. If we talk about like institutions where we can, basically have their analysts just focus on actually creating the reports and not focus on the infrastructure or on the data, because we can gather all that data through API keys and they can select what type of data they want and then just rely on our infrastructure and architecture to create these reports, right? And then there's another section which I think is important to mention. So for instance, currently, this is a bit of a pain point for asset managers, which is that they have to spend a lot of money on professional investment research platforms to, for instance, do portfolio optimization. And this is something that they pay a very, very big price tag for just using like 5% of the capabilities of that platform, right? But from our terminal side, you can actually just use what you want, right? So let's say I'm just interested in stocks and crypto. I can fork the project and I can get rid of all the rest and build from there. And then when there are updates on the project, I can just pull the updates that matter to me and I leave the rest out because it's not important for me. So this level of like customization where people can select what they want and build proprietary features on top of it, I think that, it will be like a very, very big like marketplace where people can, for instance, develop features for other users and then feed it back to the terminal, and the audience of users that feel that those features are worth their money, they can pay for it. And at the same time, the terminal remains free for people who don't want to have access to this data, right? So that's a bit how we are trying to, be in this game where we, at the same time, we want to keep everything like open source and we want to gather the open source community around the platform. But at the same time, we can be self-sustainable and we can create like a marketplace and, benefit from having like all this pool of talent and users and analysts around our platform.
And I could definitely also see the opportunity for being able to amortize the costs of some of the paid data sources across multiple users who don't necessarily hit the threshold in their individual uses where it makes sense to pay for that. But in aggregate, they can all benefit from being able to gain access to those different systems.
Yeah.
And then another piece that I wanted to circle back on and dig into is you mentioned that it's an MVC architecture and you want to provide the option for people to be able to fork the project and add in their own view and controller layer. And in that regard, I'm interested in digging a bit deeper on the architectural and design decisions where in MVC, there's always been a bit of a debate as to, do you have fat models and keep the controllers very lean, or do you put a lot of your business logic in the controller so that the model is purely representative of the state storage? And I'm wondering how you're approaching that kind of balance of how much of the business logic to put into the model so that it is there and people can just strip out and replace the view and controller piece, or how much of the business logic you're putting in the controller because that's the piece that people actually want to customize.
Yeah, so that's actually an interesting perspective. I think that has been one of the kind of more challenging stuff to make sure that everyone complies because it's a lot of pull requests every week. There's a lot of things going into the code and the way we perceive what the model and view and controller should be is a bit different. But overall, for the majority of part, what happens is like the model usually just is where we get the data from, is basically the gateway that brings the data. And if there is a few processing of data, it happens on the model. Then the view, what happens is usually either just prints that data into the platform or processes it a bit further just to display it on a chart. And sometimes that view code has a bit too much processing and sometimes it has a bit too less. So that area sometimes is a bit tricky and this you can realize this more when you're actually playing with the API on the notebook and you want to have access to the raw data and is already too much processed and you wish, you had like those missing gaps, for instance. So, that view model area is, for me, is where it's more hard to put like the level of like threshold of like, should this be model, should it be view? But then in the controller side, I think that I actually really like what we have. We basically just use the controller to process using argparse and Python, process the command and the arguments of the user. That's basically it. So basically the controller gets the command that the user sets. If, for instance, there are like flags and choices, we make sure that when we call the view from the controller, everything is correct from the user's perspective in terms of what they input. So the controller just handles that input and make sure that when we call the view, everything is correct. And if it isn't, we output the correct error to the user.
And then in terms of the actual community contribution aspect of it and this question of the design sense that goes into the project, I'm wondering how you have approached the kind of design goals of the system to be able to help guide people who are interested in adding different functionality to say, okay, based on what you're trying to do, these are the places where you want to put the logic. You want to just put this minimal aspect of the model in here, and just helping to provide some of that direction for people who are new to the project, just want to maybe be a drive-by contributor, but helping to guide them in terms of making the contributions in a way that is in keeping with the overall philosophy of the project.
Yeah, so that's one thing that very early on we put a lot of focus on. So very early on, we spent kind of some time writing these contributing guidelines, and it has been like a living document where we interact. And what we basically were trying to achieve is basically to have this very, very, very clear notion where we actually, in terms of that architecture that I was telling you, we actually describe it as, a context, then you have a menu, and then a submenu, and then you have a command, so that, it understands like the flow. And then we give an example. So for instance, in the stocks, you have due diligence. And, what is a due diligence for a stock is going to be different than what is the due diligence for a crypto, right? Because we are using different data source. But then at the same time, we have like a common library where we are able to put like common things. So for instance, this is where it lives, for instance, our machine learning and AI models, they live on a common folder. And the reason is because these models, they can be used on multiple different data sources, right? So one thing that we allow on the platform is you can predict a stock price, but you can also predict like, the level of unemployment in America, or you can predict a crypto, or you can predict like an ETF. So we need to kind of abstract this further level because this will be reused in multiple different like sources and contexts, let's say. And that's very, very clear when it comes to like our contributions guideline, because you can really understand what we are trying to do. And we are trying to keep it very straightforward for someone that is new to platform to understand where each of the things they want to achieve is located. That's one thing that we wanted to make sure that was very trivial, because there's a lot of investors coming into the market because of tools like Robinhood and Coinbase, and we want to make sure that not only like experts are aware of how to navigate on the platform, but also people that have started to invest like recently.
In terms of the ways that you have seen the OpenBB terminal used, what are some of the most interesting or innovative or unexpected projects that you've seen built with it?
I've seen people using it for day trading. I think that's a very, very interesting use case. I personally don't really think that the terminal is in a state that, you should use it for day trading, just because, as we mentioned, the data is mostly for free currently, which means that it's often like it has a couple of minutes of delay. If you are doing day trading, those couple of minutes like matter. And also, for instance, we don't have yet a way to have like a live screener. So if you want to look for a certain pattern or signal, you actually have to request to check if it had happened. But it's interesting to see that, people have actually started using it because of the data that it has all on the same place. The other one that I find surprising is something that I mentioned before, which is like people actually have been doing homework using the platform, using the data on the platform, discounted cash flow for building these, models. And another surprising thing is we've had actually a contributor working on a graphical user interface for the platform because they want a better like user interface. And, that is not like yet a thing, but it's interesting to see that, people are wanting to exploit the capabilities of the terminal and just build like a better front end to interact with it.
And in your own experience of building the OpenBB terminal and now moving it into your full-time endeavor, what are some of the most interesting or unexpected or challenging lessons that you've learned in the process?
I would say that the biggest one is like market data is a huge, huge pain. It's very expensive, that the licenses to be able to display data for a big pool of users when it's running through your servers and you're actually, displaying it from your service. That's like a massive, massive pain. And we've been on this journey in regards with the chatting bot, where we actually want to allow people to have access to this options flow. And that this has been like a long process of understanding how to be able to do this. The other area is because our product is like open source and we have an MIT license. Sometimes it's tricky to use certain projects out there, certain packages, because they don't have such a permissive license as ours. So for instance, even when we talk about building like a front end using like a package like Qt or something, they don't have like an MIT license like ours. So, there's a whole like different game here because they are not as open source as we are. And then how do we handle that? And the last one that I would say is in terms of like convention or in terms of naming, because we are dealing with multiple data providers for like multiple assets. What happens often is that the way, for instance, CoinGecko calls like, for instance, Bitcoin is different than the way Binance does or Coinbase does, and being able to say that, this data is for Bitcoin and it comes from these 3-4 different data providers is sometimes not easy to do, is a very complex challenge. We've been so far, been able to do this, use kind of some models to do this automatically and then just review and make sure it's working well. But yeah, it's something that we spend some time on.
And for people who are interested in being able to explore the finance ecosystem and do some sort of analysis or try to do some individual research for potential investments, what are the cases where the OpenBB terminal is the wrong choice?
I'd say it's the wrong choice if you want to use it as a trading platform. Although we have like brokers integration, such as Didier or Binance and whatnot, I don't think that the platform should be a place for trading. The other one is for people looking for financial advice. As much as this is investment research, like you shouldn't, use this for making like decisions for you. You should still put in the time to build these investment report theses that then you can leverage to make a decision, but you shouldn't like rely on the data feed from some paid data source and then buy if they say that you should buy or
As you continue to build and evolve the project and the community around it and the business on top of it, what are some of the things you have planned for the near to medium term?
Short term, I think that these investment research reports, like where people, and we're talking about only like retail, but actually people from institutions can create their own reports and then distribute it from our platform. I think that's like going to be a big thing. And in order to achieve that, one of the things that we already discussed is that we want to start to integrate like paid data sources, and that will bring like more users to the platform, which can bring more data partnerships, which we're going to bring more users, more developers, allowing us to integrate more data. And then more data means that equity analysts or financial advisors on the platform can build better investment research reports. So this is one of the things that, we are really, really betting on. And then we're talking about not only like building investment research reports, right? But we're talking about also building like state-of-the-art machine learning models using like different like data feeds and then selling these through our platform. And one of the good things is that we are not here advertising that, we have a proprietary like super AI that, tells you what the stock price is going to be tomorrow. No, everything is open source. So it means that like everyone can actually see what this consists of and they can, just tune it in their own way and use the data sources that they want. And then they can, either sell these to other people. So creating effectively a marketplace, or they can use it for their own investments and even put in their own feeds of data, right? And I think that one of the things that I'm also super, super excited about, but I wouldn't say this is a medium term because of the complexity of the task, is currently, I think that for me and for all the investors out there isn't any platform where you can have all your investments, right? So if you invest in stocks, you have your broker or something else. Then if you have crypto, you have, Kraken or Binance. And then if you have like real estate, you have another platform. Or what happens is people end up using an Excel spreadsheet to keep track of all the investments, right? But if we start building all these different asset classes and all the markets, all of these on the platform would just make it like, it would just add so much value to everyone because they wouldn't need to leave our platform. And we could track that all from your platform. And then imagine that instead of having like a data source partnering with us to provide data to the platform, having like a tax integration company where they build on top of our platform and they recognize these portfolio holdings and they can just, do your tax breakdown for Portugal, for instance, that would be just like a massive amount of value that would bring. And that's like more of a long-term like dream of mine, but like I really think that this is something that we will be able to do someday.
And are there any particular areas of contribution or help that you're looking for that people who are listening might be able to dig into?
Oh, everything. I'm so excited about like having the opportunity to be working on this because like it's just so exciting, the amount of things that we have to do. There's like so much to work on and so much to bring. Is like 3-4 people ask for Forex data, then you have like 10-20 to ask for crypto data, and then someone else wants something, a machine learning AI model to be able to parse this. It's like many things that can be done on our platform. So like if people want to be part of this, like we have space in any area, whether it is like developing a proprietary feature even, or a feature that they want to display, whether it is creating a screener for other people to have access to, whether it is building what is going to be like our report full customization. There's just like so much opportunities in the space. And I mean, we are hiring. So if people want to join us, we'll be super happy about that.
All right. Well, for anybody who wants to get in touch with you and follow along with the work that you're doing, I'll have you add your preferred contact information to the show notes. And with that, I'll move us into the picks. This week, I'm going to choose a show that I started watching recently called Vikings Valhalla on Netflix. I guess it's a follow-up series to another show called Vikings that I have not watched yet, but that's focused on the exploits of Leif Erikson and that whole time period. So just a fun kind of historical drama, pretty well done. So I've been enjoying that. And with that, I'll pass it to you, Didier. Do you have any picks this week?
I would like just to probably tell the story of the terminal, how it started quickly. I think it is kind of funny. I was working on a full-time job, right, like 8 hours a day, and I started this on Christmas. And I was spending like between 4 to 6 hours, sometimes 8, like every day. And then the weekends, I was having no weekends. And what happened is that my girlfriend started saying that, we don't do things anymore because like you are always working. I was like, oh yeah, I'm just like, super focused on this. It's like I was adding like features every day. I was seeing the terminal grow really, really fast because it was so easy to add features. And then when I released it, I remember we were watching a movie and I said, okay, I just put the terminal open source and now I'm going to kind of slow down on it because, I'm happy with this MVP version and I'm going to slow down on it. And I just had put it on Reddit and we went to watch a movie, right? And the phone wouldn't stop with notifications and I ended up not watching the movie. I ended up not sleeping that night. And what I told her that, would be me slowing down from the platform was actually me working on it even more than before, if that was possible. And I feel that, that's like super interesting. And, I appreciate a lot, like my girlfriend for being with me on this since the beginning, and my dogs as well. They've been a huge company of me coding in the night in the sofa. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time today to join me and share the work that you're doing on the OpenBB Terminal. It's definitely a very interesting project and very ambitious. So it's always great to see people building fun and interesting things in the community. So appreciate all of the time and energy that you've put into that. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Tobias. It has been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to check out our other show, the Data Engineering Podcast, at dataengineeringpodcast.com for the latest on modern data management. And visit the site at pythonpodcast.com to subscribe to the show, sign up for the mailing list, and read the show notes. And if you've learned something or tried out a project from the show, then tell us about it. Email hosts@podcastinit.com with your story. To help other people find the show, please leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends and coworkers.